Faithfulness, the light of truth in human loyalty, commitment, and uprightness. Clarification, enlightenment, and correction in the radiance of the Grail Message. Foreword. A call to true faithfulness in an age of betrayal and confusion. Humanity stands today in a time when faithfulness, once regarded as a noble virtue, has almost vanished from human conduct. Promises are broken with ease, commitments dissolve at the slightest discomfort, and loyalty is often directed toward personal advantage rather than toward truth. In homes, workplaces, friendships, communities, and even in spiritual life, many now operate with a casual disregard for reliability and uprightness. The chaos around the world reflects this inner decay. Yet faithfulness is not a social virtue. It is a spiritual requirement, woven into the laws that govern creation. Whenever the human spirit fails in faithfulness, it tears itself away from harmony and begins the slow descent into confusion, suffering, and moral disintegration. This book is written as a call back to true faithfulness, the kind that is rooted not in emotion, fear, or habit, but in the living recognition of truth. It is written for all who feel inwardly that something is deeply wrong with the modern understanding of loyalty. It is also written for those who have been wounded by betrayal, disappointed by people, or disillusioned by religious and social institutions. The Grail Message brings a clarity that cuts through centuries of misunderstanding. It reveals that faithfulness is not first a duty toward human beings, organizations, or traditions. It is a duty toward God's will, which alone determines what is right, pure, and lawful. This work seeks to enlighten, correct, and liberate. It calls every reader, regardless of their background, to rediscover what it truly means to be steadfast, reliable, unshakably loyal, and inwardly anchored in the light. For only through true faithfulness can a human being grow, mature, and fulfill his or her purpose on earth. Introduction. The lost meaning of faithfulness. How humanity replaced loyalty to truth with loyalty to people. The Grail Message and the reawakening of genuine faithfulness. Why faithfulness cannot exist without spiritual uprightness. The difference between emotional attachment and true fidelity. Faithfulness, as understood today, has been reduced to sentiment, cultural expectation, or blind allegiance. People speak of being faithful to friendships, marriages, leaders, beliefs, traditions, groups, or institutions. Yet these forms of human loyalty often have no connection to what is spiritually right or lawful. In many cases, they encourage stagnation, falsehood, and dependency. The true essence of faithfulness has been lost. Humanity gradually shifted its loyalty from the truth to people, from spiritual conviction to emotional bonds, from inner recognition to social pressure. This has led millions into confusion, guilt, manipulation, and moral compromise. Faithfulness became a word used to demand obedience, suppress independence, or maintain unhealthy relationships and structures. But the Grail Message reveals something profoundly different. Faithfulness is fidelity to truth, light, and law, never to human opinion or personality. A person can be faithful to a friend, leader, or tradition and still be entirely unfaithful in the eyes of spiritual law if the object of their loyalty opposes what is right. True faithfulness flows from uprightness. Where there is no purity of intention, no clarity of recognition, and no courage to stand for what is right, faithfulness cannot exist. This introduction lays the foundation for the journey ahead. 1. The misunderstood nature of faithfulness. Many assume faithfulness means never changing direction, even when the original path is wrong. But spiritual faithfulness demands constant correction and self-honesty. Loyalty to truth sometimes means withdrawing loyalty from people. 2. Why humanity needs spiritual clarification. Moral collapse always begins with a collapse in faithfulness, in marriage, leadership, governance, friendship, and spirituality. Humanity is drowning in broken promises because its understanding of loyalty is built on emotion instead of law. 3. The Grail Message is guiding light. The Grail Message restores the genuine meaning of faithfulness by rooting it in truth, recognition, intuition, responsibility, obedience to spiritual law. It separates the eternal from the transient, helping the reader distinguish authentic loyalty from the forms that merely appear noble. 4. Faithfulness and uprightness, an unbreakable link. You cannot be faithful and yet dishonest. You cannot be faithful and yet impure in motive. You cannot be faithful and yet compromise with wrong. True faithfulness demands strength, clarity, and steadfastness before the light. 5. Emotional attachment versus true fidelity. Emotional loyalty may bind a person to wrongdoing, but true fidelity binds them to what uplifts, purifies, and aligns with creation's will. Emotional loyalty enslaves, spiritual faithfulness liberates. This book aims to restore to humanity the radiant dignity of genuine faithfulness, a virtue without which no spiritual ascent is possible. It will challenge old assumptions, correct misconceptions, and illuminate the path toward a life firmly anchored in truth, where faithfulness is not a burden, but a joyful expression of a spirit aligned with the light. Part 1. The essence of true faithfulness. A clarification of its nature, origin, and purpose. Chapter 1. What faithfulness truly is. The spiritual core of constancy, loyalty, and reliability. Why faithfulness begins in the spirit, not the intellect. Faithfulness is one of the most misunderstood virtues of our time. To many, it means emotional attachment, blind loyalty, or unthinking devotion to individuals, institutions, or beliefs. But true faithfulness, in the light of the Grail Message, is entirely different. It is the steadfast alignment of the human spirit with truth, purity, and the laws of creation. Faithfulness is not primarily an intellectual decision, it is a radiational stance of the spirit. It arises naturally when the human being is inwardly upright, clear, and sincere in will. A faithful person remains constant not because they force themselves to, but because their inner conviction harmonizes with the unchanging laws of God, laws that never bend to human moods, convenience, or personal advantage. This constancy gives faithfulness its strength. It is not passive, it is active, living loyalty to what is true, noble, just, and lawful. It is a spiritual posture that holds firm even when circumstances change, when others disappoint, or when one is tempted to deviate. Faithfulness is therefore not loyalty to a human being, but loyalty to what is right. It is the spirit's natural response to the light. And wherever true faithfulness is found, trustworthiness, integrity, and inner peace follow. Chapter 2. The radiational nature of fidelity. How purity, clarity, and conviction form the foundation of loyalty. Why true faithfulness strengthens the soul. Every human thought, decision, or action sends out radiations. These radiations either harmonize with the laws of creation or clash with them. Faithfulness, as a spiritual quality, emits a clear, steady, bright radiation that stabilizes the inner life of the one who bears it. A faithful spirit stands erect in clarity. It does not waver with emotional tides, nor does it compromise truth for convenience. The radiational field produced by faithfulness connects the individual to higher currents of strength, courage, and guidance. This is why a faithful person often feels inwardly supported, even in difficult moments. They are held by the law. Faithfulness purifies. It removes inner contradictions. It brings order to one's thinking, speech, and actions. Through fidelity to what is right, the threads of one's life become strong and luminous, capable of withstanding trials without breaking. In contrast, unfaithfulness produces a fragmented radiation, unstable, clouded, and weak. Such a person easily collapses under pressure, becomes inconsistent, and loses inner grounding. True fidelity strengthens the soul because it aligns the spirit with cosmic constancy. Wherever loyalty to truth exists, weakness cannot remain. Chapter 3. Human misconceptions about faithfulness. Blind loyalty versus lawful steadfastness. Why emotional devotion often leads to bondage. Humanity has long distorted the meaning of faithfulness. Instead of connecting loyalty to truth, humans connect it to personal relationships, family expectations, social groups, religious institutions, emotional ties, cultural obligations. Such loyalty is often blind. It binds people to situations that violate their inner knowing, suppress their growth, and darken their spirit. Blind loyalty destroys clarity because it demands the silencing of the intuition. It leads to compromise, suffering, and inner conflict. True faithfulness is the very opposite. It never demands self-betrayal. It never requires one to follow what is false or harmful. It is steadfast only where truthfulness and lawfulness exist. Many relationships, organizations, and beliefs collapse because they are built on emotional devotion rather than spiritual fidelity. Emotional loyalty changes with disappointment. Spiritual loyalty remains constant because it is rooted in truth, not sentiment. Where emotion governs, bondage arises. Where spirit governs, freedom reigns. Faithfulness is freedom, not attachment. Chapter 4. Faithfulness is a divine attribute reflected in creation. How all of creation stands upon unwavering law. The human spirit is a mirror of cosmic constancy. Creation stands firm on divine constancy. The sunrise, the seasons, the rhythms of growth, the laws of reciprocal action and attraction, all operate with perfect faithfulness. Nothing in creation wavers, everything is upheld by strict, living laws. This constancy is what humans perceive as reliability, order, and harmony. When a human being is faithful, he reflects a divine attribute. He echoes the firmness and clarity of the laws that govern all life. Faithfulness is therefore not merely a human virtue, it is a cosmic principle woven into the structure of existence. The human spirit was created to mirror this fidelity. When it lives in accordance with the laws, the spirit emits a steady, harmonious radiation that contributes to order in its environment. When it rebels through deceit, inconsistency, or disloyalty, it disrupts both inner and outer harmony. Faithfulness connects the human being to the very heartbeat of creation. In its presence, one becomes a pillar, reliable, stable, trustworthy, reflecting the constancy of the divine order from which creation flows. Chapter 5. The inner voice is the guardian of true loyalty. The role of intuition in preserving moral steadfastness. How inner conviction resists corruption. Intuition is the spiritual voice within the human being, the quiet, unmistakable guidance that reveals what is right, noble, and pure. It is the guardian of faithfulness. Whenever a person is tempted to betray truth, abandon their principles, or compromise their integrity, intuition speaks. It warns, it resists, it pushes the human spirit toward uprightness. This inner resistance is not emotional guilt, but spiritual clarity. True faithfulness is only possible when intuition is listened to. For it is intuition, not intellect, that recognizes what is truthful, what is pure, what aligns with law, what strengthens the soul, what is worthy of loyalty. The intellect can justify anything, including betrayal. It can reason its way around truth. But intuition stands firm, unmovable, because it receives light from above. A faithful person is therefore one who obeys the inner voice even when it is inconvenient, costly, or unpopular. Such obedience protects the spirit from corruption, deceit, and downfall. Intuition is the compass of faithfulness. Without it, loyalty collapses into blind allegiance or emotional dependence. Part 2. The spiritual foundations of faithfulness. Law, radiations, and the immovable anchors of upright commitment. Chapter 6. The law of reciprocal action and faithfulness. How faithful or unfaithful actions always return consequences. Faithfulness is not merely a moral virtue admired by human beings, it is a lawful radiational condition that resonates through the entire creation. Every act of loyalty, sincerity, and steadfast commitment creates a luminous vibration that strengthens the spirit and draws back harmonious currents. Conversely, every act of betrayal, inconsistency, or disloyalty releases dissonant radiations that return as painful consequences, whether in relationships, work, spiritual striving, or inner peace. The Grail Message clarifies that the law of reciprocal action, popularly known as, what a person sows, he must reap, is the foundation upon which all true faithfulness rests. This law does not judge, it responds. It does not reward or punish, it mirrors and returns. When a human being acts faithfully, he plants seeds of reliability that return as trust. He builds inner strength that cannot be shaken by circumstances. He aligns with the purity of spiritual laws, which then support his path. When a human being acts unfaithfully, he cracks the foundation of his inner stability. He attracts mistrust, loss, and spiritual weakness. He sets in motion radiations that eventually expose and correct his deviations. Thus, faithfulness is not a sentimental ideal. It is a lawful condition required in a creation built upon constancy and order. To be faithful is to cooperate with the structure of existence itself. Chapter 7. Truth is the only legitimate object of loyalty. Why faithfulness to untruth is sin. How the light demands alignment with what is pure and lawful. Faithfulness becomes destructive when it is given to the wrong object. Human beings often imagine that loyalty to a person, an institution, a group, or a tradition is inherently good. But the Grail Message firmly corrects this misunderstanding. Faithfulness is only virtuous when it aligns with truth. To be faithful to false doctrines, corrupt leaders, emotionally binding relationships, or inherited beliefs that contradict spiritual law, is not loyalty, it is bondage. Human beings have, for centuries, mistaken emotional allegiance for spiritual fidelity. They have remained loyal to harmful customs out of fear of rejection, loyal to family traditions out of guilt, loyal to religious interpretations out of conditioning, and loyal to people in positions of authority out of dependency. But true faithfulness demands fearless recognition of truth, alignment with what is pure, rejection of what is false, even when widely accepted. Faithfulness to untruth is a betrayal of the spirit, a violation of the light, and an act that brings suffering because it places the soul out of harmony with creation. The light demands loyalty to what is true, not to who is popular. Chapter 8. Purity of intention is the root of constancy. How mixed motives weaken commitment. Why a divided heart cannot remain faithful. Faithfulness is impossible without purity of intention. A human being whose motives are divided, seeking approval, advantage, reward, or emotional security, cannot remain steadfast, because such a person is carried by the instability of his own desires. The Grail Message clarifies that intention determines the radiational quality of every action. A pure intention produces clarity and strength. An impure intention creates weakness, conflict, and spiritual instability. Where motives are mixed, commitments become conditional, promises become fragile, loyalty shifts with convenience, and inner conviction dissolves at the slightest pressure. Purity of intention is not emotional fervor. It is not zeal. It is inner clarity, a quiet alignment with what is right, free from self-serving shadows. When intention is pure, the spirit stands firm. Faithfulness flows naturally. And the human being becomes trustworthy in both earthly and spiritual matters. A divided heart cannot remain faithful because it does not truly know what it serves. But a purified intention anchors the soul in unwavering constancy. Chapter 9. The role of will, thought, and inner purity in fidelity. How wrong thinking produces instability. Why steadfastness requires spiritual clarity. Faithfulness does not arise from emotion but from the will, the spiritual core of a human being. The will directs thoughts, thoughts shape attitudes, attitudes manifest in actions. When the will is weak, thoughts are scattered, motives are inconsistent, and fidelity becomes impossible. Wrong thinking, thinking rooted in fear, vanity, greed, or self-preservation, produces moral instability. Such thinking weakens resolve, creates excuses for deviation, blinds the human being to truth, and leads to behavior that contradicts his own better knowledge. Faithfulness requires an inner order where the will is directed toward what is right. Thought follows the guidance of the will. Emotion comes last and serves the higher recognition. The Grail Message explains that inner purity, purity of will, thought, and desire, creates a harmonious radiational environment where fidelity becomes natural. It is not forced, it flows. Faithfulness is ultimately a state of being, not a task. It reflects the inner harmony of a human being aligned with spiritual clarity. Chapter 10. Recognizing true authority and rejecting false bonds. Distinguishing between allegiance to light and allegiance to humans. The danger of spiritual slavery. Much of humanity's suffering, both personal and collective, comes from misplaced loyalty. People bind themselves to charismatic personalities, religious leaders, cultural expectations, ideological movements, and emotional dependencies. But the Grail Message teaches that the only rightful authority is truth. All else is temporary, fallible, and often misleading. True authority uplifts, clarifies, and liberates. False authority demands submission, obedience, and emotional dependence. Faithfulness directed toward human-centered authority becomes idolatry, fear-based loyalty, spiritual enslavement, or intellectual bondage. The awakened human being must learn to question authority without rebellion, recognize truth without prejudice, resist emotional manipulation, stand upright without fear of isolation. Faithfulness is never servitude. It is the free, conscious commitment of a human spirit aligned with the light. Whenever loyalty demands the sacrifice of conscience, intuition, or recognition of truth, such loyalty is false and must be abandoned. Faithfulness is noble only when given to what is true, pure, and lawful. Everything else is a chain that binds the spirit and prevents its ascent. Part 3. Human failings in the path of faithfulness. Why people falter, betray, or remain half-true. Faithfulness is not a fragile emotional pledge, it is a radiational state of inner firmness. Yet human beings fall away from it more readily than from anything else. The Grail Message explains that unfaithfulness is not an event but a gradual inner decay, beginning in thought, intention, and attitude long before any outward deed appears. This part exposes the inner weaknesses that corrode faithfulness and explains how these failings arise and how the human spirit becomes vulnerable to them. Chapter 11. Emotional attachments that masquerade as faithfulness. How sentimentality blinds judgment. Most people confuse emotional closeness with true loyalty. They believe they are being faithful because they feel deeply about a person, a group, a leader, or an idea. But emotional attachment is unstable. It rises and falls like waves, depending on mood, comfort, affection, or personal benefit. 1. Emotional attachment is self-centered, not truth-centered. Sentimental loyalty is rooted in how the other makes one feel, not in what is right, true, or lawful. When feelings change, the attachment collapses. Thus many of humanity's greatest betrayals occurred not through deliberate malice but through emotional inconsistency. 2. Emotional loyalty often demands blindness. People say, "I trust him because I love him," or "I follow this leader because he inspires me," without examining whether the path aligns with truth. Emotion demands that faults be ignored or justified, yet true faithfulness requires openness of eyes and clarity of spirit. 3. Sentimentality blocks intuition. The quiet inner voice, meant to guide toward uprightness, is smothered by emotional noise. In this blindness, people cling to unhealthy bonds, harmful relationships, and misguided allegiances, believing they are being loyal. 4. True faithfulness stands even against one's feelings. Faithfulness belongs to the spirit and thus stands above emotion. It may require resisting the very person one loves if they move against truth. Faithfulness never binds one to wrong. It binds one only to what is lawful, pure, and upright. Chapter 12. Cowardice and the fear of standing alone. Why many abandon their convictions under pressure. Faithfulness often requires standing alone, sometimes against the crowd, public opinion, or even one's own community. Many falter here, not because they do not know what is right, but because they lack the courage to remain steadfast in it. 1. Fear weakens the will. Fear of rejection, loss, humiliation, or punishment causes people to abandon their convictions. They prefer security to truth, comfort to uprightness. Cowardice has broken more promises than malice ever has. 2. The human being wishes to belong. Deep within, the immature spirit wants to be approved, accepted, praised. Thus when truth demands a stance that threatens acceptance, the weak spirit compromises. But faithfulness cannot exist without inner independence. 3. Cowardice makes the spirit heavy. Every act of weakness thickens the soul, darkening its radiations. Eventually, even the recognition of what is right becomes faint. 4. Courage is a spiritual duty. The Grail Message repeatedly teaches that the light strengthens only what is active, upright, and courageous. Those who stand firm, even trembling, are surrounded by strengthening currents. Faithfulness demands courage. Where courage is absent, faithfulness is impossible. Chapter 13. Self-interest and personal gain corrupting loyalty. Hidden motives that lead to betrayal of trust. Many claim to be faithful, loyal, committed, but only as long as they benefit. The moment self-interest is threatened, their loyalty evaporates. 1. Hidden motives are the poison of faithfulness. A person may appear devoted, dedicated, even sacrificial, yet inwardly be driven by the desire for praise, financial gain, emotional dependence, power, privileges, social standing. Such a one is not faithful but calculated. 2. True faithfulness requires purity of motive. Even a small trace of self-seeking mixes darkness into the radiations of commitment and weakens it. The human being must learn to serve because it is right, not because it is rewarding. 3. Betrayal always begins long before it becomes visible. Unfaithfulness starts in the thought, "What will I gain?" Or, "What will I lose if I continue?" Loyalty rooted in profit collapses at the first pressure. 4. The spirit can only grow through selfless constancy. Faithfulness is one of the greatest purifiers of the human spirit. It requires quiet, steady dedication to what is right, even if it brings no earthly reward. Such loyalty connects the soul to the currents of light. Chapter 14. Weak will and moral instability. How lack of inner firmness undermines constancy. Many people genuinely desire to be faithful but lack the strength to remain so. Their will is fragile, easily swayed by temptation, mood, persuasion, or circumstance. 1. Weak will causes constant inner contradiction. They say yes, while meaning no. They begin tasks they never finish. They make promises they cannot keep. Their loyalty changes with convenience. Such instability is a spiritual fault, one that must be corrected through disciplined inner training. 2. A weak will is the result of long neglect. For generations, humanity has trained the intellect and emotions but ignored the will, the true core of decision. Without strength in the will, faithfulness is only occasional, accidental, unreliable. 3. Instability attracts misleading influences. The spiritually weak are easily manipulated. They become followers of strong personalities, drifting from one allegiance to another. Instability is a gate through which untruth enters. 4. Strengthening the will restores steadiness. The Grail Message teaches firmness, clarity, and resolute action. A strengthened will recognizes truth faster, adheres to it, and remains faithful regardless of outer storms. Faithfulness requires inner backbone, a spine formed in the spirit. Chapter 15. Intellectual pride and the rejection of higher guidance. How arrogance gradually dissolves faithfulness. The greatest enemy of faithfulness is pride of intellect. When a person elevates their reasoning above spiritual guidance, intuition, and divine law, they cut themselves off from the source of true constancy. 1. The intellect cannot produce faithfulness. The intellect calculates. It weighs options. It changes direction based on convenience or logic. But faithfulness requires an immovable inner knowing, which the intellect cannot create. 2. Pride makes a person unteachable. Those who trust only their logic gradually close themselves to higher recognition. They no longer perceive warnings, nudges, or inner guidance. Thus they drift, slowly but surely, into unfaithfulness. 3. Intellectual pride leads to betrayal of truth. A person becomes loyal not to truth, but to their theories, their arguments, their interpretations, their ego. Soon, they reject anything that challenges their views, even when truth calls for correction. 4. True faithfulness is born of humility. Humility opens the spirit to light. It enables recognition. It fosters trust in divine law rather than personal brilliance. Where humility awakens, faithfulness becomes natural, firm, and radiant. Part 4. Faithfulness in daily life. Practical manifestations of upright loyalty. Chapter 16. Faithfulness in relationships and friendships. Love, trust, and moral loyalty, the difference between devotion and dependency. Humanity often speaks about loyalty in relationships, but very few understand it in its pure form. Most people confuse emotional attachment with faithfulness, believing that strong feelings alone are proof of loyalty. Yet emotions are changeable, unstable, and easily influenced by selfish desires. True faithfulness does not spring from emotion, it arises from the inner core of the spirit, which recognizes truth, justice, and purity. In relationships and friendships, faithfulness means being upright, honest, and trustworthy in all interactions. It is the quiet consistency that stands firm even when temptations or difficulties arise. It does not serve its own advantage. It does not betray confidence. It does not abandon others simply because personal desires shift. But faithfulness is never dependency. Dependency weakens the spirit, causes blindness in judgment, and forces a person to excuse wrong actions in the name of love or loyalty. The Grail Message makes it clear: no loyalty is genuine unless it is built upon what is right. One cannot be faithful to a person who leads them downward. Such loyalty is nothing but bondage, and it violates the light. True relationships flourish when each individual stands upright before God first, not before another human being. It is only in this alignment with what is lawful, pure, and truthful that faithfulness becomes a blessing, strengthening both giver and receiver. Chapter 17: Faithfulness in Work, Duty, and Responsibility. Why reliability is spiritual service, radiational effects of diligence and negligence. Work is often seen as merely a means to survive, earn income, or gain social status. But in the light of truth, work is service, and faithfulness within it is a profound spiritual duty. Every task, whether small or great, creates radiations that affect one's environment and contribute to the harmony or disharmony of the world. To be faithful in work means to be reliable, consistent, and upright in carrying out responsibilities. The person who works conscientiously aligns himself with divine law, because law rewards diligence and punishes negligence. It is not the size of the work that matters, but the inner posture with which it is done. Negligence and carelessness radiate disorder. They weaken one's spirit and create karmic consequences. Likewise, dishonesty in work, such as cutting corners, stealing time, or deceiving clients, violates the law and inevitably leads to collapse. But faithfulness in work is not slavery to duty. It is joyful participation in creation's order. When a human being works with sincerity, his radiations strengthen his surroundings. He becomes a trusted pillar, a channel through which light can bless others. The faithful worker does not serve man first, he serves truth. And because of this, his value is eternal. Chapter 18: Faithfulness in Thought, Speech, and Inner Life. How inner inconsistency breeds outer betrayal. Many people imagine faithfulness as something shown outwardly, through actions others can observe. But true faithfulness begins long before any action is visible. It begins in thought, in the quiet chambers of the inner life where a person's true loyalties are formed. If thoughts waver, contradict, or harbor impurity, it becomes impossible for outer action to remain steady. Betrayal always begins within. The person who tolerates dishonorable thoughts, who justifies wrongdoing internally, who entertains fantasies of deception or self-interest, has already broken faith with the light, even if no outward act has yet occurred. Similarly, unfaithful speech, gossip, slander, lies, and exaggeration destroys trust and radiates spiritual darkness. Every word carries power. Words that twist truth weaken the speaker and harm those around them. The Grail Message teaches that inner purity is the foundation of upright action. Faithfulness in thought and speech means guarding the inner life against corruption, refusing thoughts that contradict what is noble and true, aligning speech with clarity and sincerity, resisting the temptation to betray through careless words. Where inner life is pure, outer life cannot be unstable. Faithfulness becomes effortless, because it is anchored in truth. Chapter 19: Faithfulness to Purpose and Calling. True commitment to one's spiritual assignment, why many abandon their path prematurely. Every human spirit comes to earth with a mission, a task, or a calling. This calling is not always dramatic or public, often it is quiet, simple, and unrecognized by society. But it is essential, because it contributes to the harmony of the whole. Faithfulness to one's calling means remaining true to the inner prompting that leads toward spiritual growth, helpfulness, and service. Many begin with enthusiasm but abandon their mission when challenges arise, when applause is lacking, or when others criticize or misunderstand them. Such instability is not due to fate, it is due to inward weakness, divided motives, or the desire for human approval. The Grail Message emphasizes that a person must stand firm in what the Spirit recognizes as right, even when the path becomes lonely. Faithfulness to calling requires perseverance, sincerity, purity of motive, courage to continue even without support, willingness to sacrifice personal comfort. When one is faithful to his calling, life opens doors at the right time. Helpers appear, opportunities align, radiations support the path. Unfaithfulness, however, closes spiritual channels and leads to inner emptiness. The more faithfully a person stands in his true purpose, the more he becomes a shining instrument of the light. Chapter 20. Faithfulness in small matters is the test of greatness. Why the light measures fidelity through everyday actions, how little acts prepare the spirit for higher tasks. Humans often believe they will be faithful when placed in great situations, when entrusted with large responsibilities, high positions, or grand tasks. But this belief is an illusion. One who is unfaithful in small things will not suddenly become faithful in great ones. This is why the light tests a human being in ordinary moments. In how he handles time. In how he treats others when no reward is involved. In how he keeps promises others may forget. In how he performs tasks that seem insignificant. In how he reacts when no one is watching. The smallest actions reveal the true orientation of the spirit. Faithfulness in modest duties builds the inner strength necessary for greater tasks. The Grail Message teaches that every small act radiates into the world. Nothing is insignificant. A person who cultivates uprightness in everyday life forms a strong spiritual core that can withstand pressure, temptation, and difficulty. Greatness is merely the harvest of many small seeds of faithfulness. When the light seeks servants for higher tasks, it chooses those whose daily lives already shine with fidelity. Part 5. Liberation through true faithfulness. How fidelity to truth sets the spirit free. Each chapter is written in 1 to 3 pages worth of depth, without indicating any page numbers, and in the same Grail Message-inspired rhythm of clarity, enlightenment, and correction you requested. Chapter 21. The Courage to Stand True Amid Opposition. Why standing for truth always attracts resistance. How inner strength grows through perseverance. Faithfulness is not proven in comfort. It is proven where pressure mounts, where misunderstanding rises, and where the human spirit must choose between convenience and truth. Every person who has ever stood for what is right has faced opposition, not because the truth is weak, but because human beings who cling to convenience instinctively resist anything that challenges their illusions. In the radiations of creation, fidelity aligns a person with a higher vibration of purity. Whoever stands in purity becomes noticeable, like a bright flame in a darkened room. This flame does not judge, it simply shines. But the presence of true light disturbs those who wish to remain hidden in comfort, falsehood, or compromise. Opposition therefore becomes a natural test. Not one imposed by God, but one that emerges automatically through the interaction of radiations. When a person stands upright, the currents around them begin to separate what is true from what is false. This friction is felt as resistance from others, misunderstanding, the pulling away of old friends, or the mockery of those who fear what they cannot comprehend. But the spirit that perseveres becomes strong, not through aggression, but through steadfastness. Like a tree whose roots deepen under pressure, so does the spirit become anchored through every challenge. Whoever remains faithful to truth against opposition becomes a beacon, and every act of loyalty to the light expands the individual's radiational power. This inner solidity is the true reward, the unshakable certainty of someone who no longer bends to fear, crowd pressure, or emotional storms. Faithfulness grows through standing firm, not in arrogance, but in clarity, not in stubbornness, but in obedience to the inner voice. Such a person becomes one who cannot be bought, threatened, or swayed, because their fidelity no longer rests on human approval, but on eternal law. Chapter 22. Cleansing one's bonds, leaving unlawful attachments. Breaking free from destructive alliances and false loyalties. Many people believe they are faithful, simply because they remain attached to someone or something for a long time. But duration is not the measure of faithfulness, lawfulness is. A loyalty that binds a person to untruth, corruption, fear, or emotional entanglement is not virtuous. It is bondage. There are alliances that strengthen the spirit, and alliances that suffocate it. True faithfulness demands the courage to separate from the latter. Human beings often cling to destructive friendships, relationships, religious groups, or social circles out of fear of loneliness or rejection. But fidelity to untruth steals strength, drains clarity, and clouds recognition. To be faithful to truth, one must examine one's bonds. Does this relationship pull me upward or downward? Does this alliance encourage purity or compromise? Does this connection enlarge my inner freedom or imprison it? Does remaining here align me with spiritual law, or violate it? If any bond diminishes the spirit, it must be released. Not with hatred or violence, but with clarity. Liberation is not abandonment, it is obedience to the higher call of spiritual responsibility. The Grail Message teaches that every bond emits a radiation. When two people or groups connect, currents flow between them. If these currents are impure, rooted in manipulation, flattery, fear, ego, or dependency, then the bond itself becomes a chain. Walking the path of faithfulness requires breaking such chains. Only then can the spirit breathe again. Leaving unlawful attachments is not betrayal. It is purification. It is fidelity to the light above all earthly ties. Chapter 23, Returning to Purity of Motive. How sincerity rebuilds the capacity to remain faithful. Faithfulness collapses whenever motives become muddied. A person may intend to stand firm, yet beneath the surface, self-benefit, pride, fear, or insecurity begin to mix with the original pure intention, corrupting it silently. Purity of motive is the heart of faithfulness. Without it, steadfastness becomes impossible. For motives determine the radiational structure of every action. A deed done with a double intention, partly upright, partly selfish, produces a split vibration. This split weakens the soul and eventually leads to betrayal or inconsistency. To regain purity of motive, one must engage in inner honesty. Not the shallow self-analysis of the intellect, which always excuses itself, but the quiet self-recognition that rises when a person stands sincerely before the voice of conscience. Purity of motive brings clearer perception, stronger intuitive guidance, freedom from inner conflict, renewed strength to remain faithful. A person with purified motives becomes unshakable, not out of willpower but because there is no longer an internal contradiction to exploit. Without impurity, the soul becomes whole again. Faithfulness then becomes natural, not forced, not exhausting, not fearful, but simply the radiational expression of a clear and upright heart. Chapter 24, Restoring Integrity After Faithlessness. Recognition, repentance, and renewed constancy. Few human beings have lived without moments of unfaithfulness. Whether through fear, temptation, weakness, or confusion, many have betrayed trust, toward others, toward themselves, or toward truth. Yet as the Grail Message emphasizes, recognition is the first step toward redemption. Only those who see their error can correct it. Faithlessness harms the spirit, not because of punishment, but because it distorts the radiations within. The inner structure becomes fragmented, unstable, and prone to further collapse. Restoring integrity requires 3 steps. 1. Honest recognition. The person must see exactly where and how unfaithfulness occurred, without excuses, without shifting blame, without softening the truth. 2. Sincere repentance. Not emotional sorrow, but a spiritual movement, a turning away from the old vibration toward a higher alignment. 3. Active correction. Faithfulness is restored through action, not words. A person must rebuild consistency, reliability, and uprightness through deeds. Progress is evident when promises are kept, words align with actions, motives become clean, fear loses its grip, the person becomes dependable again. This process frees the soul from the heaviness of past betrayal. Integrity, once regained, shines even brighter than before, because it is now rooted in conscious choice, not habit. Chapter 25, Walking the Narrow Path of Upright Fidelity. Staying firm in a world that rewards compromise. The world today often celebrates the opposite of faithfulness. People admire flexibility that has no backbone, loyalty that bends to convenience, and principles that change with circumstances. In such an environment, remaining faithful to truth requires the courage to walk the narrow path. This path is narrow not because it excludes, but because very few choose the discipline of inner clarity. It is narrow because it demands truthfulness in thought, speech, and action, consistently. It is narrow because it rejects the shortcuts that promise quick gains but destroy spiritual substance. The one who walks this path speaks the truth even when silence would be easier, acts uprightly even when compromise seems beneficial, rejects false alliances even at the cost of approval, chooses clarity over emotional comfort, remains faithful even when misunderstood. Faithfulness becomes the armor of the Spirit. It protects against corruption, temptation, confusion, and self-betrayal. Every act of fidelity strengthens the inner structure, aligning the human being with the immutable laws that govern creation. Such a person becomes trustworthy, not in the human sense of flattery or sentiment, but in the spiritual sense of radiational solidity. The light can work through such a soul. Others can lean on their constancy. Their presence stabilizes environments and inspires courage in the weak. This is the noble dignity of true faithfulness. A life lived in unwavering alignment with truth, in quiet loyalty to the light, and in steadfast obedience to the voice of intuition. Part 6. Practical exercises for strengthening faithfulness. Daily tools for inner stability and moral endurance. Faithfulness is not merely a virtue to admire. It is a daily discipline, a rhythm of inner alignment that must be cultivated continuously. These exercises are designed to strengthen the spirit, refine intention, stabilize the will, and deepen loyalty to truth. They are simple, but not easy, because they demand sincerity, courage, and self-honesty. Chapter 26. Daily reflection on loyalty, intentions, and actions. Faithfulness grows where there is constant self-observation. A human being who does not look into his inner life cannot remain faithful, for he will be carried away by impulses, moods, and external influences. Daily reflection is therefore a tool of purification. 1. Morning alignment. Setting the tone. Begin the day by asking, to what am I loyal today? What intention will guide my steps? Do I seek truth, or approval? This short inner questioning awakens the spirit and anchors the will in clarity. 2. Midday correction. Returning to center. During the day, pause briefly to check. Have I remained true to what is right? Where did I allow convenience or fear to sway me? This prevents unfaithfulness from becoming a habit. 3. Evening reflection. Harvest of the day. Before sleep, review your actions without self-deception. Where did I act with integrity? Where was my loyalty divided? Where did faithfulness strengthen me? Where did weakness appear? This reflection is not for guilt but for growth. By illuminating the day, the spirit becomes firmer for the next. Chapter 27. Radiational alignment for unshakable inner steadiness. Faithfulness cannot exist without radiational purity. The more a person is inwardly agitated or clouded, the more easily he becomes unfaithful, to duty, to people, to convictions, to truth. 1. Quieting the inner turbulence. Sit in silence for 3 to 5 minutes daily. Breathe calmly. Observe your inner atmosphere. Let tension settle. This creates room for the spiritual core to radiate unhindered. 2. Attuning to light. Focus on qualities that uplift. Clarity, purity, courage, uprightness, truthfulness, gratitude. These radiations strengthen the inner structure, making betrayal of truth more difficult. 3. Cleansing through recognition. Each time you observe a wrong desire, jealousy, envy, self-importance, acknowledge it immediately. Recognition dissolves the shadow. Unrecognized impulses become forces that weaken faithfulness. 4. Strengthening the will. A still, aligned inner life sharpens your ability to remain true, even when pressured by others. Radiational alignment is the foundation of the unshakable human being. Chapter 28. Exercises for strengthening will and conviction. Faithfulness requires a firm will, not a soft, sentimental heart. The will is the steering force of the spirit. When weak, the human being drifts. When strong, he remains steadfast. 1. The small promises exercise. Make one small commitment each morning, simple and achievable. Keep it absolutely. This trains reliability and strengthens inner authority. 2. The single yes practice. When you say yes to something lawful and good, Commit without wavering. Avoid double-mindedness. Conviction grows by learning to stand by one decision. 3. The discipline of completion. Finish tasks you begin, especially the difficult or inconvenient ones. Completion builds endurance, a core component of faithfulness. 4. The courage exercise. Once a week, perform one action you usually avoid out of fear or timidity, provided it is morally upright. Courage is a muscle. It must be used to prevent collapse under pressure. Chapter 29. Weekly questions for integrity and accountability. Every week, dedicate time to a deeper examination of your loyalty to truth. These questions help reveal hidden motives, excuses, and subtle betrayals. 1. Integrity questions. Did I stand for what is right even when uncomfortable? Did I abandon any responsibility for convenience? Was I truthful in speech, thought, and action? 2. Loyalty questions. To whom or what did I give allegiance this week? Was my loyalty to truth stronger than loyalty to people or emotions? Did I compromise in order to be liked or accepted? 3. Motive questions. What drove my decisions? Fear, pride, desire for praise, or genuine conviction? Did I hide behind excuses? Did I act out of purity or self-interest? 4. Growth questions. Where did I grow stronger in faithfulness? Where must I improve? What must I correct immediately? Weekly accountability sharpens discernment and strengthens constancy. Chapter 30. Building a lifelong rhythm of steadfast living. Faithfulness is not a single act but a lifelong posture of the Spirit. It is a steady movement toward uprightness, strengthened through rhythm and consistency. 1. Establish daily spiritual order. Morning intention. Midday reflection. Evening review. Moments of silence. A consistent rhythm supports moral resilience. 2. Surround yourself with clarity. Keep company with those who value truth and uprightness. Distance yourself from environments that normalize betrayal, gossip, deceit, or double-mindedness. Radiation influences recognition. 3. Guard your inner life. Protect what you allow into your thoughts, emotions, and imagination. Faithfulness weakens when the inner soil becomes polluted. 4. Practice courage in small things. Every act of integrity strengthens the ability to remain faithful when larger trials appear. 5. Live with expectancy and upright confidence. Trust that the light supports every faithful effort. This trust gives strength for perseverance. Conclusion. The faithful human being is a pillar of light. Standing firm in truth, free from fear, weakness, and inconsistency. True faithfulness is not a poetic ideal, nor a moral decoration, nor a trait reserved for a select few. It is the natural state of a human spirit that has awakened to the light and stands upright within the laws of creation. In an age where loyalty is easily compromised, where convictions shift with convenience, and where many abandon what is right when pressures rise, the faithful human being becomes a rare but radiant figure, an anchor in a world drowning in instability. Faithfulness is constancy rooted in truth. It is the unwavering hold on what is right even when one stands alone, even when the crowd mocks, even when loss seems imminent. But this steadfastness does not come from stubbornness, it comes from clarity. The faithful person sees the law at work, recognizes the will of the Creator in all things, and aligns with it naturally. From this alignment emerges a firmness that cannot be shaken by fear, seduction, opinion, or personal advantage. Such a human being becomes a pillar of light on earth. Their actions radiate reliability. Their words carry weight. Their presence creates order and calm. Others feel strengthened simply by coming near them because faithfulness creates an atmosphere of stability that nourishes the souls of those around them. For where there is faithfulness, there is truthfulness, purity, strength, courage, clarity, and peace. This is the state to which every human spirit is called, not as a heroic achievement, but as a natural unfolding. Faithfulness is the echo of creation's own constancy, mirrored in the soul of one who has chosen the path of uprightness. In the coming years of purification, only such pillars will remain standing, for faithfulness is harmony with law. Everything unfaithful collapses under its own inner falsehood. To become faithful is to become free, free from fear, free from dependency, free from the instability of shifting desires and opinions. It is to walk through life with calm certainty, anchored in the living truth. Epilogue: the coming purification and the triumph of the faithful. Only those who remain constant to truth will stand in the new creation. Humanity stands before a turning point long foretold but little understood. The great purification, already unfolding, acts as a cosmic sieve, separating what is genuine from what is false, what is upright from what is distorted, what is faithful from what has long been unfaithful. This separation is not punishment but consequence, the natural working of the laws of creation which now accelerate to restore harmony. In this decisive hour, faithfulness emerges as one of the highest safeguards. Those who have built their lives on dependency, emotional loyalty, compromise, deceit, or instability will find their structures collapsing, for nothing untrue can withstand the intensification of light now permeating the world. Bonds formed through convenience will break. Alliances rooted in selfishness will dissolve. Hidden motives will surface. Every false support will fall away. But the faithful, those who hold firmly to truth with a clear and upright will not only endure, they will rise. For the light strengthens what belongs to it. Those who have remained constant despite trial will shine more brightly. Their clarity will increase. Their path will open. They will become the anchors of the new era, the seeds of renewal, the pillars of a purified humanity. Faithfulness is therefore not merely a moral virtue, it is a requirement for survival into the coming order. Only what resonates with truth can remain in a creation ruled by the truth. All else burns away through the natural workings of the spiritual laws. The triumph of the faithful is not a triumph over others, but over darkness, untruth, corruption, and inner weakness. It is the triumph of the spirit that has chosen to stand upright and remain so. The new era will be built by such spirits, quiet, steady, unwavering, who carry no duplicity within them. Their constancy becomes the foundation upon which the will of the Creator can be revealed anew among humanity. Appendix: Practices for recognizing and living faithfulness. Meditations for strengthening loyalty to truth. These meditations help the spirit turn inward, away from external pressures, toward the clear voice of intuition. They cultivate inner stability by allowing truth to radiate unimpeded through the soul. Practices include stillness before dawn to align with purity, meditating on the law of reciprocal action to understand consequences, contemplating scenes of nature to sense constancy in creation, reflecting on personal moments of disloyalty in order to recognize and uproot them. Exercises for clarifying motives and intentions. Unfaithfulness often begins with unclear motives. These exercises help illuminate hidden ambitions, emotional entanglements, or ego-driven desires that corrupt loyalty. Exercises include writing down motives before important decisions, questioning whether loyalty is to truth or to comfort, identifying emotional attachments disguised as fidelity, discerning whether a commitment nourishes or drains the soul. Daily practices for steadfast thought, speech, and action. Faithfulness becomes natural only when practiced consistently. These daily exercises build an inner rhythm that supports constancy. Speaking only what is true, necessary, and kind. Completing work tasks reliably and without procrastination. Resisting gossip and betrayal in speech. Choosing actions that reflect inner conviction rather than external approval. Radiational alignment and purity prayers. These practices strengthen the inner connection with the light and protect against influences that weaken loyalty. They include morning prayers of alignment with truth, evening purification practices to release impurities gathered during the day, conscious breathing with the intent of clarity and uprightness, short invocations calling for strength during moments of pressure, weekly journaling for consistency, courage, and uprightness. These reflections help track inner growth and expose areas where faithfulness fluctuates. Weekly prompts include: where was I steadfast this week? Where did I compromise? What fears still weaken my loyalty? What truth did I recognize but fail to act upon? What step can I take next week to grow in constancy? These practices slowly build a life of unshakable loyalty, not to people or institutions, but to the eternal truth that governs all of creation. Through them, the human being rises into the radiational purity required for the new era, a faithful soul standing firmly in the light.